So I'm Jim Gray, a learning technology consultant, working primarily at Yogi Play. For people who want more information either about me or Yogi Play, the URLs are up there, so feel free to take a look. I'm happy to follow up, by the way, at the end of this. I'll send an email at the end of this to get more information. So Warren asked me to talk a little bit about the assessment rubric that I created for Yogi Play. And the idea is to really start with developmental principles. How do children learn? What engages them? And really use that as a way to think about evaluating apps. And it's meant to be useful for reviewers, which is what we do at Yogi Play, but also parents and also developers. So be happy to get some feedback, let me know what you think. So we start looking at how our children engage. What gets their attention, what holds their attention. So I'm going to give you an overview. There's 11 different categories. Just kind of give you a quick overview and then do a little bit of a deep dive in a couple of different areas. So first thing we look at is just at a really basic level, are kids going to use it? Is it age appropriate? Or is it the content for a 3-year-old, but it requires reading? Those kind of issues. What's the user experience? And by this I mean, is it age appropriate? You know, again, is this something that parents could be concerned about? Is it age appropriate, or is there inappropriate kind of content or marketing? So at a very basic level, we look at those kinds of things. And then we think about what's the extrinsic motivation. You know, what is it that in the structure? If you look at what kids actually do, where does that structure come from? Where does the motivation come from? And is it, to what extent is it external in the leveling and the rewards and those kind of issues? And to what extent is it more intrinsic? And I'll say more about these later, but this will give you a basic idea. For young children, intrinsic, as people know and we've mentioned before, is very important. It's a way for them to take what they know, put it out in the world, give feedback. So young children are working on issues like autonomy. You know, do they get that sense that I can do it? So they're working on issues like initiative. You know, and that's the opportunity is to create environments like a preschool, like apps that let them work out those development issues. And then there's the issue of social motivation. You know, is there a social component where the social interaction is part of the app experience? It could be during the app experience, it could be later. One way, I think, in a very simple way to keep in mind the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic is that if a child makes a boat, they have a blank slate, and this is what they do. Where did that boat come from? You know, it came from their experience in some way, and it exists in a way that they can share it. When they talk about it, it means something very different than if they made it through a connect the dots of experience. And the animation could be wonderful, it could come alive in very interesting ways, but then the social interaction around it is going to be a very different experience if they created it versus if it's something that they did, but it didn't really come from them. So once we know the kids are engaged, then the question is what might they learn? So I try to evaluate at a high level, are they going to learn anything? So they're engaged, but are they likely to either learn what an app claims to teach, or in some cases there's a lot of possibility, a lot of opportunity for learning that isn't really claimed, but could be important. So when we evaluate apps, we think about that. I like to think about some sort of deeper learning in the sense that you could memorize something in a rote sort of way, or in math, for example, you really understand a number line and understand quantities, you have a deeper understanding about some concept in a domain. And then we look at authentic learning. Are kids learning something that could be directly relevant to their everyday life? And again, I'll have more to say about this in a minute. Does the app itself adjust to different kids? And especially in the classroom, this is important. There's a range of kids, different learning styles, different interests. Does the app provide that flexibility? Is there some sort of recording? Is there some way that the app helps a teacher or an adult learn about learning? What is the child learning? Some kind of evidence of learning. It could be something quantitative, or it could be just samples of work. But that's something we look at. And then are there teachers for those adults, the parents and the teachers, to adjust the app, because they know the kids. And there are some apps that do a really good job of making those adjustments easy and accessible, and some that don't do it, or some that do it but it's buried. So we look at that. So I want to do a little bit more about a couple of the types of motivation and a couple of types of learning. So for extrinsic motivation, we think about at a very high level, what's the kid appeal? Is it going to grab their attention? Does it have a good story? Is it something that will grab their attention in that way? But then does it provide feedback? That's a kind of engagement that will hold a child's attention and will keep them interested. It needs to be contingent, it needs to be immediate. There's different types of feedback in terms of a growth mindset. Harold Dweck, I think I mentioned earlier in the session, is somebody who's looked at providing feedback that gives kids useful information about their strategies and doesn't give them more of a fixed mindset about how they think. Look at goals, we look at progress, all of that's part of the structure for extrinsic. Put a couple different examples here, both on-screen and off-screen, because I always like to think about looking at apps, but thinking about the same kind of concepts and how they play out off-screen. So, a couple examples here. If you think about a puzzle is something where the goal is very clear, and you get feedback about how close you are to that goal. There were people last night working on a puzzle. So that same concept then plays out in apps like this Montessori Numbers. It's an app that we rate fairly high on extrinsic motivation. For intrinsic, we look at things like control. Toontastic is one that you can imagine. Kids have control over objects, and what they do is captured, and they completely determine what happens. Creation, do kids get to create something themselves? Or do they get to explore? And for all of these, we have a more detailed sort of rubric, and as I say, I'd be happy to share it with folks. But this kind of gives you an idea of the kind of thing we look at. So, art is a great example of this. That's actually my daughter. Painting with physical paint, painting on a digital screen, either way. The idea is you want to give a child a place to take what they know and think and express it. So, an expressive medium is very high for intrinsic motivation. And then socially motivated kind of engagement. Certainly there's just open, collaborative play. I think it's an area where we haven't explored very deeply yet with apps, but there's a lot of potential there. Interactive roles, turn-taking, all of those are things that have a kind of a social interaction built into the app experience itself, or actually creating something together, because then we have worked together and we created something, and that's part of that engagement. A couple of examples, Alien Adventure is one that I think does a very good job of that. It gets parents and kids working together, or any other activity on the left there. Is an experience that parents or teachers have with their kids. It takes that social engagement and makes it very powerful. Deeper learning, we look at, does the app address a foundational concept of some sort? So again, quantities, if it's about numbers or a number line, and do kids reflect on it? Do they actually apply it in some way? There's a lot of good research on chutes and ladders. In fact, there's a kind of a number line built into the game. Bob Stigler has done this work, and if kids play this game, they really do get a sense of the relationship between numbers and a number line by playing. Same thing with a game like digits. Children interact with the game in terms of quantity with literally their digits, their fingers. So it's their own body in terms of how they represent the quantity, and then use the technology in a very appropriate way. And finally, the authentic learning. By definition, as I said, it's about building skills or knowledge that's directly relevant to kids' lives. And it could be on the screen, or it could be across settings. It could literally be sort of an app that gets kids out and about and doing things, or it could just represent something in a realistic way. So a couple examples, think about light. You know, light is something, if you give a 3-year-old a flashlight, they're going to explore the properties of light. There's many sort of situations during the day where kids want to turn on the lights, turn them off. If you start looking, light is everywhere, and it's very relevant to your life. So an app like Bobo Explores Light does a really good job as a simulation of letting kids tap into that, something that is potentially available everywhere around them. So that's the sort of the overview of what we do. As I say, I'm happy to talk more. If people want to see in some detail, the folks at Yogi Play are happy to share, how we do what we do. So, shoot me an email. I'm glad to say more or answer any